Okay, so today's lecture is going to be coding from scratch, week 1, and this is going to cover HTML, CSS, and things of that nature. So let's go ahead and begin. So first things first, what is HTML? HTML stands for a hypertext markup language. HTML is a markup language that is used to have more than just text sitting on a page. So essentially we can have images, links, tables, lists, essentially everything that you see on a website was written up with HTML, of course, with other languages on top of it for styling and functionality, but the base of it all is HTML. So the first thing we're going to look at is the HTML document structure. So if we're looking at some code here, I have created, oops, wrong way, the structure, the skeleton of an HTML page. So this is the skeleton of any HTML page. We have our doc type saying HTML, so that's saying what kind of document is this? It's an HTML document. And then we have our opening and closing tags for the HTML. So anything that is called an opening tag is going to have this syntax where you have the 2 arrow keys or carets, I call them, and then the HTML element name in between that. So the first element that we're looking at is the HTML element. So here we have the opening, and here we have the closing. And all closing tags are going to have this syntax with the / after the first caret with the element name inside. So within your HTML tags, you have your head. The head tag is different from a header and a heading tag, and we'll discuss the differences later. But essentially, this is where you're going to put links to other files. You're going to have meta tags, as you can see here. You're going to have your title, which when you look at a website is going to be what you see in a tab. So if we're looking at a website, let's say fans.com, and let me move it over here so you guys can see. If we're looking at a website right here, on the top tab, it says Vans official site. That would be written inside of the title tags. So anything written inside of the head tags is not going to be seen on the main page, basically anything inside of here, but it is going to contain important files and titles. After your head, you have your body tag, and this is where you're going to be spending the majority of your time. This is where you'll be writing most of your code as far as creating a navigation bar or a section, putting images, galleries, things like this is going to be all inside of the body tag. So this is essentially the main structure, a skeleton of an HTML file. So with that, we have different structure elements. So we have a div. It's used to create a generic container for content. So this is essentially a way for you to easily divide your page. You have different divs for different sections. So if we are looking at a website here, right here, this yellow background is probably one div. Right here, where they have these 3 images, is probably another div, and so on and so forth. Each of these little sections could potentially be divs. Then we have our header. So this is different from the head. A header is new to HTML5, and it's used to mark the header part of the body. There's only one per document. So that essentially is going to be right at the beginning of your body. So right here, you would have header, and then you have your closing tag header. So right here, we would have our header. And inside of the header is normally where you find navigation. So if we're looking at an example here, this white section is probably a header, and inside of here is a navigation. We also have a footer, which is the counterpart to the header. It outlines the footer content in the document. So this is essentially when you're seeing all of this, right? The shop, sports, support, you can get a lot of contact information, customer service, things like this where you put your social media links. This is all would be considered a footer. So you would put that at the bottom of your body. So here you would have your footer. And there we have it. So we have our header and our footer, and it's all inside of the body. We also have our navigation, which is abbreviated by nav. So it's used to mark up the navigation area. So this is where you're jumping from different pages of the site. So if we're looking at this website here, for example, this is the navigation. We're jumping from men's to women's to kids, things like that. And then here would be another smaller navigation. So this is the main one for the site. This is the one for this section. In the navigation for the one for the main site, you would just put it inside of the header. So we have our opening and closing nav tags inside of the header. After that, we have section, which provides structure around a block of content, grouping in a logical format. So section and div kind of work the same way in the sense that it divides your page in a logical way. So with div, you could do it with sections, you could do it with divs. They pretty much do the same thing, visually at least. And here you would put it after your header. So you might have different sections, or you might have different divs, however you want to organize your page. So sections are easy because you could do like an about me section, background section, skills section if you were building like a portfolio page, for example. Or if you were building an e-commerce site, you could have different sections for products, for example. Are there any questions so far?
No.
No, we're good? Okay. Next, we'll go ahead and discuss content elements. This is where we're going to introduce our heading tags. So that's where now we have head, header, and heading tags. And there is a difference between all three, and they can be easy to mix up. Heading tags is essentially like a markup. It is a heading of a section. It's going to increase in size depending on the number. So H1 is going to be the largest, whereas H6 is the smallest. So if we would, let's say we had a section here, and then it was an about me section. So I have H1 tag saying about me. And I would have that. And then I could have different headings like, let's say inside of the about me, I wanted to talk about my background. So background, things like that. And then I will show you on a page what that looks like. So if we go here and we open the folder that it's in, we're going to drag it to a browser. I'm going to bring this over here. We can see we have the about me and how background's a little bit smaller. We also have the paragraph element. So this is going to be the smaller text on a page. So in my about me, let's say under background, I wanted to say something. And I'll just get some dummy text here. And a good place where you can get dummy text is Lorem Ipsum. Okay, here, it's like old Latin. You can just generate how many paragraphs you want. And then you can steal some of this. That's word wrap here. All right, so then I save. And then if we look here, we have our paragraph content. After that, we have italicized, which can be differentiated by EM versus I. EM stands for emphasize, where I is italicized. Emphasize is treated as important. So if you look at websites for the visually impaired, emphasis is going to look a little bit different than italicized, but on a non-visually impaired site, it looks pretty much the same. It just looks like an italics. So if we wanted to italicize a certain word, we would just wrap it around. So let's say I wanted to italicize me. I would put I, and then I would have my closing tag. So here I'm nesting elements here. I have H1, and inside of H1, this word me is wrapped around italicized. So if I save that and we look here, we see me is italicized. We also have strong, which is bold. So I could do the same thing for background. Let's say I wanted to bold that. I would just put strong, and then I would have my closing tag, save it, refresh. Well, it's bolded because it's a heading tag, so that's a bad example. Hold on. Let's put it on this word here. And now we see that that's bolded. After bold, we have ordered and unordered lists. They both syntactically are the same, except the only difference is the beginning is O for ordered and for U is unordered. And the difference between that is ordered list is going to be numbered, so like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Unordered list is going to look like bullet points. So if we were to have a section about skills, right? And here I'm going to say, just do a different heading so you can see some differences. And I'm going to have an ordered list. And inside of that, we have our list item. So that's where you see the LI. And in between the LI tags, you would have what you wanted to list out. So let's say I wanted to list out HTML, CSS, and let's go with JavaScript. Save that. Come back here, we see the list. So we see that it is numbered because we did OL, ordered list. If I wanted to make that bullet points, I would just simply change the O to a U. Save it, come back. It is now bullet points. Okay. If I wanted to enter an image, you would use an image tag, which is abbreviated by IMG. Essentially, what that is the ability to enter a photo. So let's say I wanted in my About Me to enter a photo, and there's something special about image tag is that it does not have a closing tag. So normally we would write it like this, but images are self-closing, which means they do not need that closing tag. But what is special about them is that they have something called an attribute, and that's kind of like a characteristic. So the attribute for image is source, which is SRC. And you would set that equal to the source of the image. So if I had an image saved here in my lecture folder, that's my root directory. Inside of my root directory, I have two files. I have my index.html file and my style.css file. Let's pretend that I had another file in here directly that was puppies.jpg, right? If I wanted to put that, I would just put puppies.jpg, and it's going to automatically go to your root directory and pull that file. If that file doesn't exist, nothing's going to appear. So if I refresh this, there is space for an image, but there is no image because that file does not exist. If I wanted to grab an image from online, let's say go to Google and I write puppies. If we take this guy, I'll just right click and I'm going to copy image address. And then in there, I will put the site. So it's super long, but normally it's a lot shorter than that. So I save that. And there it is. We have our image. So with image, remember, source can either be something that's in your directory or it can be something that exists online. If it's inside of your directory, you're just going to want to put the file pathway. And by that, I mean, let's say there was another folder in here called images, and inside of that folder is where you had your puppies.jpg. Then in here, you would do images / puppies.jpg. Okay. But we are going to, I lost that here, lost that address. We'll just put this back. All right. And last thing that we're going to talk about as far as content elements is going to be our anchor tags. Anchor tags are essentially what you're going to use for linking. So anything that's clickable on a site was using an anchor tag. So if we look at an example here, the fact that I can click this and it takes me somewhere else means that I used an anchor tag. I click this and it took me somewhere else. We used an anchor tag. Okay, so the structure of an anchor tag, let's say in my footer, right, I have a follow me section. I'm going to put some social media. And I want to link it to my GitHub account. So I'm going to put my anchor tags, and we have our opening and closing tag. Inside of the opening tag, an anchor tag has an attribute as well. Instead of source, it uses href. And then we can set that equal the same way that we did with images. So let's say I wanted to link it to another file. Let's say I had another HTML file. Then I would say, let's just pretend it's called another file. .html, and it would take me there. But we have to enter something in between the opening and closing tags so it can actually be clickable. Because if I left it like this, then there's nothing to click on. So what we want it to click on is going to be in between the tags. So let's say I wanted to, let's say, have another file be what's clickable. So if we look at here, we see another file, and then it tries to take us, if you look at the address, to another file.html, but the file was not found. That's because the file does not exist. Okay, so if I wanted another file to exist, I can just right click, new file, put another file.html, then I'll write some code here just so you can see it at work. If we refresh this, we see it takes us to that page. If I wanted to take it to an external link, let's say I wanted to go to google.com, we would get the address, right? Or let's say I wanted to go to this Vans shop. I would type in the address, and we would have Snoopy shoes. We save that. Snoopy shoes. And it takes us there. If I wanted to open it in another tab, then we would just add another attribute. So inside of here, we would do target, and you would set that equal to _ blank. Here. And we see that it opened up in a new tab. And so we opened up a new target. Are there any questions so far as content elements? Okay, go ahead and keep going. And we'll go ahead and jump into CSS. So CSS is cascading style sheets. It was developed as a way to style the HTML and create reusable styles, also called rules. These styles or rules can be added directly to an HTML file by using the style element, or they can be added separate in a .css file linked to the HTML element. I'm going to teach you how to link it in a separate file because that's what's common practice, and I want you guys to get used to doing that. CSS is called cascading because the styles from a parent element also apply to its descendants. So essentially, just like how we inherit genes from our parents, I inherited my brown hair, CSS child elements are going to inherit from their parents. So for example, if we apply a font style to the HTML element, all other elements and tags in that document will have the same font styling applied to them. So what that means essentially is if we're looking at this file, right? Everything exists inside of this HTML element, right? Everything is wrapped inside of this HTML element. So if I apply font styling and a background color and all those things to this HTML element, then it's going to apply to all of its children, which is everything that exists inside of it. So in a smaller scale, if we're applying something to an unordered list, all the child elements are going to get affected as well. So that's what that means. So we have, well, first, before I go into CSS properties, let me show you how you can actually connect the two files together. So in my root directory, I have a style.css file, right? So in order for me to connect the index and the style.css, I'm going to go to my head tag, and I am going to have a link tag. So we have link, and link uses href, I believe. And we're going to style.css. But prior to that, we're going to have a relation. So rel equals style sheet. And there we have it. So we use rel for relation, and the relation of this file to this file is it's a style sheet, and we have href. So just like we use href for an anchor tag, we use it for a link tag, and we're referencing our file style.css. So that's just that pathway that it's in the directory. And we save that, and now these two are connected. So if I added a background color, and I'll show you, go more into depth about this. It now has the background color blue, and it has been applied to everything. So different CSS properties that we'll go over is the display property. So the display property has 4 values. We have block, inline, and none. So block makes an element a block and won't let anything sit next to it on a page. So let's pretend you had 2 images in a row. If they were in block display format, then the one would go on the next line because they won't let anything sit next to it on a page. And by that, it means a row. So it'll go like this. Inline block makes the element a block, but it will allow other elements to sit next to it on the same line. So they would still be on the same line, but they will kind of be in their own space. So there's enough spacing between the two. Inline makes the element sit on the same line as another element, but without formatting it like a block. So the images will be right next to each other. Display none makes everything disappear. So you can't see it at all. It's almost as if it's like invisible ink or something. Display none, nothing is there, nothing will show. Another property we'll talk about is the position property. So the position has also 4 values: absolute, static, relative, and fixed. Static is a default value. So if I didn't put a position property in here at all, when I left it blank like I did now, it would default to static. So that's how it's automatically rendered. Absolute, the element is positioned relative to its first position. It is not static. Relative, the element is positioned relative to its normal position. So if I put left 20 pixels, it adds 20 pixels left to the position. Position fixed, the element is positioned relative to the browser window. So it's going to stay in that spot relative to the window. So when we're looking at this here, and let's say we minimize and we start adjusting the size, it's going to be relative to the window size. Okay. Any questions on display or position? All right, so let's go ahead and discuss the CSS box model. So this is something that's very important to remember as far as when you're styling your page. And you'll find that CSS is kind of like an art form. It's a lot of trial and error. Sometimes you'll try something and it doesn't come out exactly the way that you thought it would have. One thing to pay attention is to the box model. So inside of the box, we have the content area. So that is referring to any of the content, this heading, this image, this paragraph, this list, right? Those are our content. With the content, you can adjust the height and the width. Outside of that, there's padding. So you can adjust padding altogether. So if you wanted to have equal padding all around, you would just have padding equal to whatever pixel you wanted it to be. Or you can adjust different sides of it. So let's say you wanted the left-hand side to be different than the right-hand side. Then you would do padding left something, padding right something else. And same for top and bottom. Outside of the padding, you have the border. You could do the same thing. If you wanted an all-around border to be the same, you just say border. Or if you wanted the top to be different from the bottom, you can target that exactly. So border top or border bottom. Outside of the border, you have your margin. Same thing there. You can set all the margins equal to the same amount, or you can specify depending on which side you're looking at. So let's go ahead and add some CSS to our page. So let's look at the elements that we have here. We have some images, we have a navigation, and let's say in our navigation we have leading to the other page, right? So we have another file, .html, another page. I'm going to close that anchor tag. Okay, so in my CSS, the way that you write CSS is you're going to write the element that you're targeting. So if I wanted to target my nav, I would write nav, and then you have curly brackets. Inside of those curly brackets is where you're going to write your property. So I'm going to do background color, and then it's followed by a colon, and then after that colon is going to be the value. So let's say I wanted the background color to be green, and then you're going to follow it with a semicolon. And you can put as many properties as you like. So I'm going to adjust the color too. So the color, actually I'll do font style. Let's say, actually we'll do font family, and sure, monospace sounds cool. We'll do that. And we can add a border of 2 pixels. Okay, then with my image, I'm going to adjust the height. Let's say I want it to be 80%. And then let's say we adjust all the H1s to have the font color white. And then we have all the paragraphs be another color. Let's say yellow. And then let's say with our anchor tags, when I hover over my anchor tag, I'm going to do a:/hover. And I'm going to say background color white, color green. So essentially when I hover over, it's going to have a background color white with the font color being green. So let's save that. Let's see what our page looks like. Oh, yep. Exactly. So we have green is the navigation's background color. And then as we can see when I hover, we have a background color of white with the text being green, which is what we did here. We see our paragraph element is yellow right here. The image, the height, let's adjust the width so you can kind of see it a little bit better. Save that. See, the width was adjusted 80%. You can also, if you don't like percentages, you can adjust with pixels. So let's say I wanted it to be 100 pixels. Save that. And that's 100 pixels, right? Let's see what other properties we added. So that we can see, oh, and we saw monospace, right? We saw the monospace here. So a great resource, because CSS properties are all hard to remember as far as because there's so many of them. W3 Schools is a great resource for looking up different properties. If you go to CSS, you can see all the different things that you can change, right? So navigation bar, drop downs, image galleries, display, links, fonts, text, things like that. And you can just click on it. Let's look at margins, for example, and it will show you all the different values that you can have for margin in all these different ones. So with CSS, it's an art form. You can do endless things in a different number of ways. There's not one correct answer on how to do something. So, you know, just play around with it, be free with it, experiment with it, and W3 Schools is a great resource for it. Now, another thing we're going to discuss here as far as CSS is concerned is classes versus IDs. So we saw how we can target an element by itself, but let's say we wanted to target a specific class or an ID. So let's say there's different sections that I want to have the same thing, right? So if we're looking at a website, and go back to the main page. Let's say I have different sections and I want all the fonts to be the same, right? We're reusing these fonts. So maybe I have a class on that font for these different sections. In order to do that, I would write class in my HTML. So in the opening tag, we have another attribute, it's class, and you set that equal in quotations to the name of the class. So let's say we called it Vans, right? So we have the class Vans applied to this H3. The beauty about classes is you can apply them where as many times as you like. So let's say this Vans class is controlling the font type and color. So I want that to be here. I want it to be here. So I'm going to put Vans. And let's say, yeah, that's where I want it. So I save it. And in order to target a class, you're going to do dot the class name. So Vans. And then here we can control the font family. Let's do fantasy. I don't know what that means exactly. I've never used that. Actually, let's use monospace. And then let's say the color is purple. If these colors are very limiting, I just wanted to point out because it's only like a handful of recognized colors. If you wanted to be more specified, a great resource is Adobe or color.adobe.com. And you can just go around the color wheel and pick a color. So let's say I wanted this blue right here. You can put the hex number. So you can just copy this. And with hex numbers, you would put a pound, hashtag, number sign, whatever you want to call it, followed by the hex number. And then Let's go ahead and see. It's done. So here we see that it's changed color and the font because we applied a class. Now, IDs, as far as CSS is concerned, works the same way, but with IDs, you want them to be only one. You want them to be unique, and that's mainly for JavaScript. So as far as CSS is concerned, if I put an ID here and I called it bananas, right, and I say I want to target that. Now, instead of using a dot for IDs, we're going to use the hashtag bananas. And then I want the color to be yellow. And I'm going to say font style italic. I don't think that's recognized. Let's say font family sans serif. Okay. We see here that it changed yellow and it has the sans serif font. So if I apply that ID somewhere else, it's going to do the same thing that I did as for classes. But with IDs, you're going to use them in JavaScript. So if you are grabbing an element by its ID and there's multiple elements with that same ID, it's going to be confused. It says, okay, I see two things with the ID bananas. Which one do you want me to grab? And that's going to cause an error in your programming. So you want to make sure that you only use unique IDs. You can have multiple IDs. You can have as many IDs as you want in here, but you have to make sure that the IDs are not the same name. Classes, you can reuse as often as you want. Are there any questions? That kind of wraps it up for us today. We're just going over HTML and CSS. Are any last minute questions before lecture ends?
No.
Good?
Yeah.
All right, cool. If you do happen to have any questions, feel free to reach out to me via Slack or schedule a code review with your mentor.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks. Bye.